Oh, won't you please turn on your magic beam? Sandman, bring us our dream.
Oh, hey guys, thanks for joining me. Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk to you today about gravity. Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Apparently it's like a science thing I just read about the other day. And so yeah, so we're going to do that. We're going to have a little chit chat on gravity. And actually I haven't eaten yet, so I'm going to have a little bit of a snack. I have some chicken wings while we talk. Hope you don't mind. Those good buffalo wings. So here's the deal. There have been a few different milestones along the way in the development of the theory of gravity, right? First, Newton came along and he was like, listen, here's the thing. Gravity is like two objects pulling each other. He thought the force of gravity came from objects themselves and that they had an attractive power, sort of like magnets. What Einstein said was, it's not the objects themselves that are causing gravity. It's the fact that they're depressing points in the fabric of space-time, and this is now a well-known conception, but there is a problem. It's kind of tautological in a way, because he explains gravity with gravity, because how is something going to fall into a gravity well without using the force of gravity itself to explain that interaction? So it's not perfect. So I was thinking about how dark energy is pushing everything away. Then I got to thinking about Newton's third law of motion. And forgive me for a second, I had to run upstairs. You won't see it because of the edit, but I'm gassed. My camera sucks. It keeps like moving. It doesn't stay in place. Penis. It's like no different. But what I was saying is, I was thinking about Newton's third law of motion, right? And for every action, there's equal but opposite reaction, yeah? So if everything is being pushed away from us, doesn't things have to be being pushed towards us? So if there's a propulsive force coming at you in every direction, then that would sort of hold you in place, right? But then why is it that we're not all frozen in space and that objects are, interacting gravitationally? So it made me wonder, what if there was some propulsive force that was coming at you from every direction? And if there were no impediments, then you would be frozen in a position of inertia. But, what if an object could block that propulsive force from any given direction? Let's say you're stationary and there's an object, a massive object here, and from only that direction is the omnidirectional propulsive force being blocked. Would you not then be pushed into that direction, sort of like being sucked in like a vacuum, but it's not the object itself that's sucking you in, and it's not that it's a hole created by the object, but rather a block. It's a blockage in a particular direction of a force that's going, from all directions. So you would sort of be sucked toward that, like a vacuum sucking. Special Officer Doofy knows about that. Let me show you what I'm talking about here, so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about here. Let's say I have a fan on one end, and I have a fan on the other end, and I'm standing in the middle with you. Okay, and let's just imagine that there's fans all around, right? And they're all blowing at me. Okay, well that's great. If they're all blowing at a similar velocity and amount of power, then I'm going to just remain in place. But let's say you have in front of one fan, you put a screen dough. It's going to actually diminish the force coming from this fan, and thus this fan is going to blow, all these other fans are going to blow me toward this, because there's a weakening of the force from this direction. So let's say that's like the screen door is like planet Earth, provides a little bit of shield. But let's say you have something much more massive like the sun, then what it's like is like putting a brick wall in front of one of the fans. Then it's actually you're going to get, instead of being sucked toward the screen door, you'll, depending on where you're standing, obviously, like if you're in the middle between the two, you're going to get pushed towards the brick wall. You're going to go slam into that brick wall because you see what I'm saying. Now I have a better diagram that I took more time with before this. So it's like this. If you've got stuff coming, from one way from the sun and one way from the earth, and actually, again, it's coming from every which way. I feel like I'm not explaining this well, but hopefully the idea is clear. It's the force goes through the object, but it weakens. The force goes through this object, it weakens even more. So it creates a greater vacuum of force near the more massive object. So this is what we can deduce gravity is like. And if you excuse me, I'm just going to have a little bit of fresh mozzarella with my wings. I hope you don't mind, but I'm, finishing up my meal as I explain gravity. And so what we're looking at here is an omnidirectional propulsive force coming from each and every angle, from all angles, interacting with all matter. But matter is blocking the flow of that force. On the other side of every piece of matter, the force gets weakened. But you might say to yourself, you can say it, and then I'll answer after I have my bite of cheese. You might say to yourself, if it goes through an object and it's weaker on the other side, but isn't there a propulsive force coming through on that side that should be negating the weakening? The idea is that this force doesn't seem to interact with itself. Sort of like light doesn't, photons don't bounce off each other. The force doesn't seem to have a physical interaction with itself. So it only seems to come from every direction, but when it interacts with matter, it weakens. It comes out on the other side, but in a weakened state. So now I know you're saying to yourself, listen, I don't know, man. Einstein's equations, they work. When we test them in space with, clocks and stuff, they work. But I'm going to show you how this concept actually works with the experimental confirmation that we've got from Einstein. Let me show you that. Okay. Let's say, big old massive object, right? Just finish it up. And then, out in space above it, you've got an electron clock. Now, the clock sends an electron back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's how it measures time. And so, what happens in a gravitational field is that electron does not simply go straight back and forth. Because of this massive object, let's draw a new clock, the electron actually gets warped down so that by the time it registers on the other side, it doesn't register as the same amount of time as if the clock were farther away from the massive object, because the force of gravity is pulling on this electron, right? So, the force is in full effect coming this way, right? And the force is weakened coming this way. The force is still going to propel the electron down toward where there's a weakening, right? It's not that it's going into a hole, it's that it's getting pushed towards an object that has weakened the flow, essentially the universe's Higgs field. It's like, it's the same concept. The flow of this force seems to be producing the effect on matter that we see the way, the bosons in the Higgs force, produce fermions or, affect fermions or whatever. I'm not an expert on quantum mechanics, but, and I hope you don't mind. I had my meal. I'm gonna have a little dessert. Got me a piece of chocolate cake. And come on, try to do a video here. Okay. And so, what we have here is, I wanted to talk about the implications for black holes. And what happens when matter gets, like, when the force pushes things in every direction, and you have, let's say, a black hole or a neutron star, something so dense that the force can't go through the other side. It does not make it through. That's how strong the gravity is. Because as we just went over, what normally is happening is that the force is going through an object and it's weakening on the other side. But if it cannot penetrate because the matter is so dense, then that gives us a black hole. Well, let's think of the implications of that. Because what's bothered me for a long time is this idea that a black hole is like this deep, like, vagina. Because again, you can't explain gravity with gravity, and this also would seem to require alternate dimensions, because, like, you can't create, like, a well in 3D space. But let's say that matter gets pushed together from every direction, and it's so tight that nothing goes through, and then in theory, we think about the Pauli exclusion principle. It says no two objects with mass can occupy the same space, right? So they can't overlap. But what it also implies is that an atom, with its, parts, like, things get so jam-packed that they're not, like, moving, that they're essentially, they freeze. And so there's also this philosophical concept of kind of like, when you get to the very end of something, it almost starts at the beginning, or it does start at the beginning, conceptually. And, actually, this even speaks to to Penrose's theory of, conformal cyclical cosmology, where at the end of the universe gets so sparse, the way the matter is distributed, the matter and the energy is distributed, it actually begins to resemble the infinitesimally small singularity theorized to be the genesis of the Big Bang and so on. And so, in theory, when you create an environment in the black hole that's so condensed that they get squished so close together that it prohibits any further motion, and so does that create actually a state of absolute zero? I'm gonna have a little more cheese. And I'm not saying that I'm, like, right about it. I'm saying either I'm right about it or I'm ignorant about it, and it could be either. It's probably the latter. And I'm just, I'm just being honest. Like, if I don't understand something in physics, I'm not gonna just act like, yeah, I know that. Like, if I don't know it, I don't know it. And so I'm gonna ask, wait a minute, how does it work until I understand it? Cue the music.
We the people need to know. Do you think we're alone?
Anyway, so yeah, he asked me what I call this groundbreaking new revolutionary theory in physics. I told him, the aristocrats.